Hello, all. I am Daniel Coolbaugh. I am the host of the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. Again, welcome back. Today we have a very special guest, Steve McHugh. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you very much. I hope you're well.
Yeah, I'm well. Again, thank you so much for rescheduling. I don't know what was up with my computer last week. It took about 8 hours to figure out that other episode. And my friend goes, "You're not gonna be able to record later." I'm like, "That's true." And he's my tech guy. So I really, really appreciate you coming back. We were very bummed to miss you last week. So just
always listen to the tech guy.
I know, right? Just want our audience to know. So Steve's book, Black Code, came out this past Tuesday. So we were really disappointed that we couldn't get to, the interview sooner, but we are happy to see that, it's doing really well. And we're hoping to, we're actually going to get, like I told Steve before we started recording, we are going to put this podcast out right away today on all the platforms. And then we're actually going to get the Spotify channel up as well. So if you're listening to us on YouTube or one of the other broadcasts, like the RSS feed on their link, we will also have that Spotify channel up and running. So please make sure you check out these other episodes as well as Steve. Steve, I'm going to start off with that first question. I kind of talked about a little bit in the past. I like to talk to people ahead of time and, kind of see where they're at currently. But I always want to know, what has your writing journey been like up until this point? I know that's a hard question sometimes, but.
It is. It's a long question.
Yeah, everybody always wants to know. Like, I keep getting emails and messages, and they're like, please ask these people because your guys' fans want to know, like, what has your writing journey been like up till this point?
I think the thing with writing journeys for authors is that every single one of us has a different one.
Yeah.
There's no two that are the same. There's similarities and bits, but not actually the same. I started writing. I fell in love with writing when I was at school. My English teacher. I used to read a lot of Choose Your Own Adventure books by Steve Jackson, even Ian Livingstone. Every week we had to fill out a form to say what book we'd read for English. And my teacher took me aside, Mr. Piercy, took me aside and said, you need to stop reading these Choose Your Own Adventure books. You need to read an actual book and not one where you need to roll dice and write down numbers. So I was like, okay. So he said, go next door to the library and pick 3 books. So I went next door to the library and I picked up Men at Arms by Terry Pratchett. One of the David Gemmell books, and I think it's Dark Moons or Twin Moons or something like that. And Stephen King's It, which should not have been in a school library for 15-year-old kids. And I devoured them. Went to the library, got every Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Clive Barker, anything I could find, just devoured it all. And that made me think, this is what I want to do. And then I did nothing until I was about to become a dad for the first time when I was 25. And that was sort of the impetus for me to kind of do I either need to do this, or I'm going to turn to one of those people that always says I'm going to do it and then doesn't actually do it. And I don't really want to be that person. So I wrote a book called For Past Sins, which was rubbish, and put in the graph for years. And then I went to get agents for Crimes Against Magic. And I got lots of, we really like it, but, and it's not quite right for now and stuff like that. And I decided to self-publish it. I had a bunch of friends who were self-publishing at the time, and they all do really well. So I self-published it. And then at the end of the year, a publisher rang me up and said, we'd like to republish that and everything else that you write this series. And then the following year, after I'd put out my 3rd book with the publisher, then I got an agent for book 4. And then, then it's all kind of, and then I got nominated for a Gemmell Award for Best Novel. And it's gone from strength to strength, really. But yeah, the initial sort of from not being published to being published was kind of a weird way. And a lot of authors don't have, they kind of do it a bit more. They get an agent and then they get a publisher. And I did it the wrong way around, or the right way around, depending on the point of view.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my writing journey. And then I finished the whole Nate Garrett Harlequin story, the last book of which came out in February, called Horseman's War. And then I wasn't under contract for anything else, so I just wrote some stuff, sent that to my agent, which she's now got. And I thought, you know what, I've had this science fiction book just sat there for ages, and I've not done anything with it. So I decided to publish it and see what people think. And that was Black Coat. So that pretty much is a very truncated version of my writing history.
And it's funny that you say that because, like, Dirk Ash and I were talking about, Anthony Ryan, for instance, who went self-published and then, went back and forth and then was publishing and, now is does it kind of like a Brandon Sanderson, kind of like a hybrid where he'll publish, certain things traditionally and then other things, he's got where it's going to be, indie. So, yeah. It's funny because I just talked to like a few, like Michael R. Fletcher about that too. He's like, because he had an agent for Beyond Redemption, and then they published it. I forget which company. And then, the other ones, like nobody really wanted, but then, the indie community loves them. So it's really interesting to me to see you guys and, how, and I think it's good for people to know that, that
it is. Yeah.
It is a journey,
It is. And I think, traditional publishing, it will always be there, and I think over time more and more authors are going to do hybrid publishing.
Yeah,
I think self-publishing lets you take more chances. It lets you do things that when you're in a publisher and you have a successful series or a successful book, a publisher really likes it if you keep doing that. If you have a successful science fiction or fantasy or whatever book, they'd like your next one to be a success in the same genre. And with self-publishing, that's not really I don't have that same constraint. If I want to write something that's science fiction, I can. If I wanted to try different things, I can experiment, I can do other things. And also traditional publishing is very slow.
Yeah.
And self-publishing is as fast as you can write and get it edited and get a cover done and get it put out there. So I think over time, those two, you're going to see more authors kind of doing both as opposed to more of one than the other.
Well, I totally agree. And Brandon Sanderson talks about this with his online lectures, and unfortunately got stopped with the pandemic, so he started to do some other things, but he mentions it in there right before the pandemic. I think it was like February, and he was talking about like Skyward, right? So his novel, and that was one where he talked to his agent. He was like right away and was like, if I'm going to traditionally publish, he's like, I still want to be able to, indie publish on the side. And he was one of the first traditionally published authors, besides Anthony Ryan, that I had heard who had that in their contract. He's like, I'll give you guys these things, but then these young adult, these science fiction, he's like, I'm going to indie publish. And I mean, Skyward and the other two, like the third one just came out. They've been very, very popular. And that's like the Librarian series that he does, the young adult ones have been super popular. And, but he talks about that now. I mean, it's funny when it was like before the pandemic, like where he's like, yeah, it's been pretty successful at Skyward, but then literally all the sales went Skyward, for those indie published. And I think it's because sales were up like 65%, they said last year during the pandemic, and I think indie, like you said, like the traditional publishing was already slow. And now with the pandemic, it's even slower. So I just think a lot more people are going to go indie. So
yes, and I think when I first self-published Crimes Against Magic, this was 2012, so
okay,
that was a while ago, and the big kind of rush of indie authors had just started, and there was still a lot of, you're an independent author, you didn't edit it, you didn't write it properly, you couldn't get published normally, whatever, and there's still some of that now, but it's much, much less than it was back then. I think people are starting to see indie authors be seen as favorably in comparison to traditional authors.
Oh, yeah.
Mike Fletcher and Dirk and Rob Hayes and Alicia and co. They're all absolutely superb authors, and they could all be traditionally published authors if they should wish to have done so. So yeah, no, I think over time you'll start to see that discrepancy of people thinking, well, you're an indie author, hopefully go away, because indie authors are putting out some absolutely amazing stuff. Just absolutely amazing.
Well, look at we just talked even just the covers the other day, just the covers, just the blurbs, just the, whereas in the past you could be like, you could look at one of these books, right? Like, and no offense to the indie community, but like, you're saying like 2012, even like a couple years ago, like you look at somebody, you're like, okay, and if you just looked at the covers or the books themselves, you're like, okay, this is an indie published book. And we talked about the other day where like we're blurring the lines here. You guys are
Yeah.
doing a great job, and like
Yeah.
you can't even tell between reading or looking at even just the covers or the blurbs or anything online that it's indie versus traditional.
No, I mean, for example, Rob Haynes' Never Die is one of the most beautiful covers I've ever seen in my entire life.
Man, Felix
it's
is
just
amazing.
Sensational. And that would be sat alongside any traditional fantasy cover that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that it's people are finally understanding that a lot of independent authors take it seriously. And if you take it seriously, you can have success. And if you want to keep having success, you need to keep taking it seriously. It's a job. It's not a way to make a quick buck.
Yeah.
So the people who thought it was a way to make a quick buck, they're kind of going away because they've realised it's not. So yeah, the people who are doing well are the people who take it seriously, which is how it should be.
No, I think you really hit the nail on the head there, though. Like, I consider like teaching nowadays, right? Anybody that goes into teaching wants to be there because there's so much extra stuff you have to do. And I actually like it because, like, first of all, you don't get a big paycheck, but like you have people that are like, I want to do this thing. And years ago, I used to teach with people that like didn't want to be there, didn't like the kids, and they did it for the paycheck. But it's kind of nice where, on the flip side of that, because now you have people that know what they're doing, are highly trained, and really want to be there. And I feel like the same things for indie publishing. It's like before it was like a vanity press, right? Like originally, and then like originally, even before you got into it. And, that's what people thought of it. But then the vanity presses went away, and there were some still there, right? Some people trying to, to make money and do that. But really, with like a couple years before you with like Lindsay Baroker, right? I think she was 2009, Joe Lalo, who's a host with her on their podcast, like they were really some of those first people to indie publish, where it was indie published as we know it today versus some people think is a vanity press, and it's not. And I really think that you make a good point, though, that, there are people that are here, are very talented, choose to do it. I think there's also that stigmatism that people think you're forced to do it, because you don't get queries or whatever. It's like, why? Like Kevin Hearn's one of those guys, who's traditionally published and, amazing books, amazing author, but it took him 6 years for anybody to want Hounded. And when I read Hounded, I'm like, I would have picked it up instantly as a publisher,
Yes.
And, like with your first one, right, with Helican Chronicles, I went and looked at that one, a while back, just the description, and I'm like, that to me, that's what I want. I don't want a lot of werewolves or vampires. Like, I want the magic and the world and the urban fantasy and your Avalon books too, like that, which I had not realized that I had not gotten those on Goodreads. So I actually just added those earlier today, and those interest me, and those might not be traditional for urban fantasy, but me and Dirk Ashton were just talking where his aren't either technically, but that's what I want personally, and that's the kind of stuff I like to write is, like I was looking at your descriptions, I'm like, see, now I'm gonna have to grab the first one, because I'm like, for both of them, I'm like, those are my kind of urban fantasy.
I think there are werewolves and vampires and things like that in
there.
But they're traditionally, obviously, urban fantasy is vampires and werewolves.
You have to have your tropes, but
and I did, and so the Helican Chronicles is basically me thinking, this will be fun, let's write it, and then I did, and then other people like it. And the Avalon Chronicles, which follows on from Helican Chronicles, and then Rebellion Chronicles follows on from both of those. It's one long story of three.
Oh, that's good to know.
So there's this. It's just as the books have gone along, and I've hopefully improved as an author. I can see things now that I'm like, I'd like to put that in there. I think that's a really good. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's put that in there, and let's do that. Let's move those around, and let's take some of it because I've always been a big fan of mythology. So when I came to kind of writing the books, instead of picking one, I just thought I'll just use them all because they're all very interesting. And why does one exist and not another one? Why is one real and not another? So I used them all, and then just stuck stuff in like ethereal legend and stuff like that. So I got to have my cake and eat it a little bit, and just sort of just stick as much as I wanted in because I found it interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it worked out quite well in the end, I think. But yeah, it's there's definitely I think that urban fantasy these days is definitely gone away from werewolves and vampires specifically.
Yeah.
Although erotic paranormal fantasy
Yeah.
is definitely still the werewolves and vampires and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But I'm not. I couldn't write that. And fair play to them that they can. I read my first book had a few sex scenes in it, and then I wrote the first book and got it published, and I read it back, and then I realized I don't like writing sex scenes, so I didn't do them anymore. So yeah, I couldn't write like erotic fiction because I'd just be the whole time just cringing horrendously. that I was like, oh man, I've got to think of another word for this particular part of a person's anatomy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I've got friends who write erotica, and they write amazing stuff. And no, I personally could not do that.
My friend and I were just talking about that the other day. We were talking about, well, actually, Mark Timoney and I were talking about that too, of just like sticking away from those. Because I'm like, he's like, well, it's like it's not something that I like to read, particularly in fantasy or whatever. Because like him and I are both really used to the Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance, so we like to write like those. And I like to write things that my 14-year-old students can read. There's violence and things, but like, I at the same time, it's like, because those are the kind of things I personally like to read. So those are the kind of stories I like to write. And all power to people, who can write like that. I first of all can't, and I think it's because I don't like to read, certain things. I just want to I'm just there for the adventure. I don't even have a lot of romance in my books. I would say I do some just for whatever, but like I don't really have too much because I'm not really interested in that personally. So yeah, but people that can do that, I mean, they're some of the most successful authors,
Yeah,
out
they
there,
are.
especially indie. So
Yeah,
there's definitely a lot to be learned there.
There are people out there who make an exceptionally good living.
Or even just the advertising, just how they hook the whole market like that. And there's a lot out there in that market, so it's like
there is a lot out there.
Like Lindsay Broker talks a lot about that, like where she had her pen name and stuff, and she was doing really well, but she's like, oh, it's not really what I like to read, and so she switched to fantasy and sci-fi. And I've read a couple of hers, and I'm glad that she did that because I really like how she writes, and I really like her characters and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely it just shows you, I feel like, where indie publishing is really successful though, because a lot of those books, like you said, the paranormal romance, there's so many series where they're very successful. And you got to wonder, like, because some people are like, well, the market's tired, or the people are tired of this and that. And then I always point to those, two genres. I'm like, clearly not. And I feel like urban fantasy is like that too, where it's like, like people like me, like I'll read really any urban fantasy, but there's so many different layers, and I don't know. I feel like there's so many different tiers within, like me and Dirk were talking about that, like him and I, like, and then Scott Oden with his, right. We're talking about like, maybe we should just band together and make a mythological fantasy genre or mythological urban fantasy or something, So just, because that's what I like Patricia Briggs books. The best ones I think are when you get into the Mercy Thompson, the actual mythology of, Coyote, like, and just the different gods and things, and, the Irish mythology. There's just so many, there's a little bit of Arthurian stuff in there, there's just so many cool things that she does in that world. And for me, it's not about the werewolves even. Like, if my buddy and I were just talking about this, it's so cool because, like she's got the walking stick, and there's so many things, like Hugh's walking stick. There's, very minor things that some people would look at mythologically speaking, but she just, makes some huge characters or huge plot hole or lines, and it's crazy to see what people do with that. Dirk's one of those. So I
love taking mythology and then twisting it to see what I can do with it that makes it the same but different. Like turning Galahad into an absolute tit. Just the most horrible human being you could possibly imagine. And stuff like that. Just and I find that endlessly entertaining. I can do that.
See, yeah, like I feel like you said the M word, you said mythology, so now I'm even more excited to get into both of your urban fantasy series here. But okay, so I don't want to detract from Black Coat too much here. So I'm really glad you said that though, because I know there's a lot of people that I talk to, and we have a lot of the same reading or writing or urban fantasy taste. So I'm glad you said that, because I know they're going to be really excited for your other series as well. I'm actually just curious to know, when you're thinking about urban fantasy, all right, what's your favorite thing about writing urban fantasy, or your least favorite thing about writing urban fantasy? I'm just curious.
My favorite thing about writing urban fantasy is the fact that I can do what I want within kind of reason. If I want to use magic and have big magic battles on a bridge in London, then I can, and I have. If I want to have
Cool.
a Dragonland on a bridge in London, and I've done that too, I can.
That's awesome.
And no one can say no, that doesn't fit with the world that you've created, because it completely fits with the world that I've created. If I want to have Hades turn up and talk to King Arthur, I can do that, because that is completely within the rules of the world that I've created. And there's so much flexibility in urban fantasy. There's so much magic and werewolves and vampires and witches and the whole thing. And that's my favorite thing, that I can just, even if I've written a new book in a new series and it hasn't got any of that mythology in it from actual mythology, but it's got the mythology from that world in it, and I can just play around with it, because it's there are parts on it that are based on real life mythology and stuff, but it's not real life mythology. And yeah, I love that about urban fantasy, that I can just, let's have a dragon, you know, idea, and I can do that. No one's going to go, no, that's silly, that doesn't fit. As long as I've kept to the rules that I've created, and I do, I don't just bring people back from the dead, or start having people who can fly and stuff for no reason and things like that. But yeah, mythology has got endlessly interesting characters in it, from all sorts of, I use Mesopotamian mythology and, Norse and Greek and Roman and Egyptian and Scottish and Irish and all sorts of things. And there's so many interesting characters in them, and that you could probably never run out if you just use them. And I love that. I love researching all of that and then seeing what I can do with it.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing about writing urban fantasy, I think.
See, guys, I'm not crazy. Steve said the same exact thing I said 2 weeks ago when we talked about it. And some people are like, well, and I think that's like, and me and Dirk talked about that too, like, again, within reason, but like, like I was just talking to Ben about this earlier with one of the Jim Butcher characters, that I know we're not going to give it away, guys. Don't worry, no spoilers. But, it's one of those books where somebody dies, and it was spoiled for me, but I still need to go read the rest. So I'm about halfway through, and I want to go read the rest to still figure out what happens. And they're such good books, and I feel like he does a great job, with the mythology and just the different things. And they're definitely, just, pinnacles with David Gemmell, I feel like. And, but we were just talking about that kind of thing. And we were curious if that person was going to come back. And I feel like, because it's urban fantasy, there's a lot of really cool ways that person could, and it would still fit within the genre based off of what he's already done. And but some people are like, obviously with just fantasy in general, get upset about the Captain America effect, as I like to call it. How many times has Captain America really died in the comics, and and then come back, and
there's definitely a law of diminishing returns. You can't keep bringing people back from the dead and have people care. Because if you read comics and Spider-Man dies, that they're not going to let Spider-Man stay dead.
Exactly.
It's Spider-Man. He's going to come back. So yeah, there's definitely that. I made a pretty big point at the beginning when I started writing of, if a character dies, then they're dead. And that is that. There are a couple of characters who everybody thinks are dead and they are not dead, but when they die, they're dead. There's one character who definitely everyone thinks he's dead, and he's not dead, and they're pretty pissed off that he doesn't die. But there was a logical reason why he hadn't died, and that reason fed into the storyline of that book. And if you can do that, and you can make sure that you don't do it a lot, that's the key.
Yeah. Well, that's the Game of Thrones, the George R.R. Martin effect, you know, like where like he kept saving characters, right? But it made sense at the beginning of the series. At least that's what like Rob J. Hayes, Dirk, and them were talking about on one of their podcasts. But then eventually it was like, okay, like these people, you know, and a lot of people did die, but some people got saved later in the series, and it didn't fit the algorithm, so to speak, right? Like it didn't fit the equation. And then some people were like, wait a minute. I know there was a lot of people angry. I forget which book it was, but they're like, no, like these people should have died, but they didn't. But then all these other characters died right off the bat. So I like that though. Law of Diminishing Return.
I like the fact that if you're going to kill a character off, and they're a major character, there should be a point to it, not just shock effect. Again, shock is the law of diminishing returns. You kill. That was always an issue with like the Game of Thrones TV show. And the books as well, but you know that you kill one character off in a shocking way, awesome. You kill 17 characters off in a shocking way over the space of a single. Okay, that's not so. That's just why should I care anymore about these characters? Because any one of them could die at any point. Within like just a sentence. Oh, and then he died, or you know, got an arrow through his eye or something. And my concern is always that whilst I'm happy to kill off characters I think actually have deserved to die, or their story is their death is the end of their story, I don't want to just do it for shock. Look, he's dead, and then you know, freak people out because I don't know. That just feels like you can do it once or twice. And then you're starting. People are going to start getting annoyed that you're starting to kill off characters.
That's why they call
build
them
up to their deaths. So I try not to do that too much. I try to if I kill someone off, it's because that's the end of their arc in a natural way. I've done a few which were shocking deaths, but that was the end of their arc in a natural way in my book. But I do think there's a I do think there needs to be reasons for just wiping out vast quantities of your characters.
Well, yeah, I think you're totally right there, because I feel like if you're at a point in your story or your trilogy and all you can do to make it exciting is just kill off characters for shock value, it's like you don't really have a good story anymore, and you should either wrap it up in a way that makes sense, or you should change something that is more meaningful.
And I've read books where they've had a cast of hundreds, and it's very clearly killing off characters to whittle that cast down to a more manageable number.
Wheel of Time.
And
poor Brandon, man.
You can completely tell that's what's happening. It's just got to the point of I have got way too many characters and to kill a few off. and I didn't ever want to get to that point, because that's just like, if I ever get to that point, I have an Excel spreadsheet. That's how I track everything.
Oh, cool.
And if my Excel spreadsheet ever gets to like the hundreds of characters, that will be massive slaughter of characters just to kind of get it back down to a more manageable number. But hopefully I'll never get to that stage.
Well, I just think it's funny because like my buddy and I were about to book club after this here in a couple hours, Malazan Book of the Fallen, and like every other book we forget about 30 major characters because there's just so many characters. And then I'm like, wait, didn't that guy die? And my friend goes, no, it was the other guy that died. And I'm like, no, I think it was that girl. And like, we have to go onto the wiki just to like keep track. And we were just talking about Wheel of Time like that, because he sent me because we're about to read the Wheel of Time together for the first time. And Mark Timoney is actually going to come into Discord with us, and we'll there's a time change, obviously. So we'll just go through Discord and, put different stuff together. But it was just funny that he sent me, both of them actually sent me the same meme or whatever, where I think it was Brandon Sanderson was on, I forget whose podcast he was on, but he was just talking about that, like how he had to literally get, he got the Wheel of Time from, Robert Jordan's wife, his editor. And then he was like, I just gotta start killing off characters. And it was all about how he decided he was gonna kill this person and not this person. And it was funny because Benjamin from Literature and Lo-Fi with his YouTube channel, I just had him earlier, and we were just talking about that before we started recording, where it was like book 6 or 7, whatever he took over. Like it was just like bam, 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 bam. But there was like no way he was going to be able to wrap up all the story arcs. So, like, what do you do at that point, especially if you're taking over?
Yeah. When you take over from somebody else, I imagine that's a very difficult kind of. I've got 4 books to wrap up a 10-book story arc because of taking over from somebody else. That's that can't be remotely easy.
Yeah, and then we were talking. I think Marco, our Fletcher, and I were talking about, like, I think it was him and I or Scott. We're talking about like kind of prepping your own work in case somebody has to take over for you later, where you don't have like all the males on cast.
Yeah.
Like, because we were talking about Farhad and the Gray Mauser, and I'm totally blanking on the original author's name. And then like somebody took over his work, which I was glad, because the newer ones were just as good as the older ones. But it's always a interesting circumstance when that happens. But yeah, I just feel like too many cast of characters. My friend made a good point. He's like, I really don't care about half these people in the Malazan books.
Yeah.
He's like, I only want to read about these ones. And
that's the problem. When you have a huge cast, there's only so much time to kind of devote to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I read Gardens of the Moon for the first time not that long ago.
Oh, okay.
And I read the second one, Dead House Gates, which is like, if Gardens of the Moon is here, Dead House Gates is up here. But by the end of Gardens of the Moon, I was kind of like, well, that's interesting, but I didn't care about half the people in this book.
Yeah,
I cared about the soldiers who got betrayed and then trying to get justice.
Yep.
But I didn't care about random person number 17 walking up the mountain and all this. That didn't bother me. Which is what the second book is much more focused.
Oh yeah, because you got Callum, Fiddler, Crocus, Apslar. Yeah, it's like it's almost like a D&D party. Yeah,
and it's vastly improved because it's focused. Whereas Gardens of the Moon is very splatter all over the place. Here's some stuff. And so I can understand why people find that first book to be super hard work. Because it is super hard work.
Oh, he throws you right into the ocean. Yeah.
Characters are introduced and you're like, oh, okay. And then they're never in the book again.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? And this happens all the way up until the end of the book when characters are introduced and then
you're like 250 pages in. And I think that's like what you said, like you're finally with the soldiers. You realize that Whiskey Jack was there earlier. Perrin was there, and you're like, oh, okay. But it's like, wow. Yeah, it's almost like, then you get Apslar's little journey, but you're kind of like, what my friend said, he was like, we could have literally cut out 200 pages and just been here. And I'm like, yeah, totally. I think that's where a lot of people, especially for Kindle, DNF, we were talking about that because Dirk and them were just talking about it, where I think that's where 65 or 70% of the people DNF is the first 200 pages. And it's because of that reason, because you don't even get to the main cast of characters till 250 to 275 pages in of a 900 page book.
And if that book was just about those guys, then that book would have been a fantastic 400 page fantasy book.
Oh yeah.
But as a 900 page fantasy book with all this other erroneous stuff, you do by the end of it, I was just kind of like, bloody hell, there's so much stuff happening that you do need a wiki just to kind of like, I don't understand, why is this person now here when they were there, sort of thing. But the second book is very clearly written by an author quite some time after the first one.
Oh, for sure.
A bit like Stephen King and Gunslinger.
Yeah.
Very clear. Gunslinger is a bit of hard work.
Yeah. For a smaller book too. Yeah, for a smaller book.
But the second book is so good because he's had so much practice of writing from that first book to the second book. And I think that really helps. I think a lot of authors who are prolific, their earlier stuff, they'll write something and then it'll be published, and then you're like, what the heck is that? And then the second book they wrote a long time after the first book, and it's so much improved because they've improved as an author.
Well, that's like I just talked about just improvements, and with somebody 2 weeks ago, I think it was like Mallory Kuhn, and then I talked to Scott and actually Michael about this too, where like I like R.A. Salvatore is one of my favorite authors of all time. I go back now and try to read The Crimson Shadow about 10 years ago, and I couldn't do it because all the things I love about him, were totally different, because that's one of his first trilogies.
Yeah.
And you go from reading somebody's 20th book to their original 3, and in a different universe, and they're still really well loved. I think I'm going to try and go back again, but because I haven't read anything from him for a while, because I just was trying to take a break to then go back in and enjoy the newer ones again. But like I could definitely tell, even like 12 years ago when I picked him up, that it was just totally at the start of his journey. But it kind of makes me feel better to know that like somebody who does these just like epic works now was at a beginning stage too. I just think it's a great example of progress, really.
Yes, I mean, I will happily put my own books into that. Crimes Against Magic, I wrote about 3 years before it came out ish, and I wrote the second one, Born of Hatred, about a year after, about 6 months later. And I think that my writing improved immeasurably from book 1 to book 2. I look back at book 1 now and I think, well, I could remove that and I could remove that, and that didn't make sense. I don't know what that was in there that could remove that. So I think when you get authors who have written a lot, or they've written a lot and it's spaced out quite evenly over a period of time, you do notice quite massive improvements in Stephen King, Dean Koontz, even Robin Hobb, and her Farseer trilogy is much better than the first The Assassin's Apprentice trilogy.
Yeah, that first book I really did enjoy it, but I had to take a couple breaks because I was like, okay. And then my friend said the same thing. They're like, you just need to, to do that. My friend said that he actually, because the brothers Gwyn do this too, John's kids, where I think that's what they were saying was they did, the second trilogy first and then went back and read them as prequels, and it was a lot different.
I love John's work. But even though he's only written, I think 7 or 8 books now,
something like that, yeah.
His second book is so good. His first book is brilliant. That you read it and you think, I don't know how you're going to do better than that. That's so good. And then he just does every single time. They just get that first 4-book arc. That last book is absolutely one of the best fantasy books I've read in a long time.
Oh, cool.
I haven't read his new stuff yet, the new trilogy.
Oh yeah, I just got Shadow of the Gods a couple weeks ago because it was maybe like a month ago or whenever it first came out, because one of the independent bookstores had it, and I was like, I want it. It'll help his sales the first month, and it's independent bookstore, so I was like, I just snatched it for later.
Yeah, I've got them all. I just haven't read them yet.
Yeah, I just found Courage today actually at a used book sale, and I was like, yeah, definitely grabbing that for $4.50. Like, it looked like it had never been opened, and I was like, how dare you people? Like, I don't know if
I have signed hardcovers of all 4 of the first books.
Oh, that's cool.
He very kindly left me. I did a signing a week after him at Forbidden Planet in London, and he kindly left me a signed copy of his 4th book for me to pick up before I went. So yeah, I got all 4, and they're amazing books. They're I think now, with the amount of talent that we've got in fantasy, urban fantasy, science fiction, horror, that whole kind of, it's probably better than it's ever been.
Oh, I definitely agree, because you can go anywhere. Go anybody's site.
You want.
Yep.
Yeah. If there's a story you like, and it's and someone's written something similar to it, then there's something good there. Yeah. Independent, traditional, however, there's so much incredible stuff out at the moment, and it just gets better. Seems to get better and better and better and better. Broken Earth books, Anna Stevens, R.J. Barker, Pete McLean. There's an absolute wealth of brilliant authors out there at the moment.
Oh yeah.
So it is very much a time to be. It's a time to be a reader. It's a bit of a terrifying time to be an author, because you read someone else's work and you're like, I don't how am I supposed to do that? How do I get better than that?
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
That's Christopher G. Brenning's book. Like I'll be done tonight. After I get my work done for 20 pages of edits, I'm going to finish up the last 45 pages of the Hellborn King. And I'm like, this, I'm like, it's like, how, I know it's not his debut, but I'm like, how do you how do you even come close to that? It literally, I think when people catch on to the trilogy, he's on book 2, he's writing now. I think when people catch on, I actually think it'll reassert the grimdark genre for a lot of people, because it's grimdark, but it's the kind of grimdark, it's the Conan type of grimdark. I feel like some people try to put too much dark in grimdark now. It's got a very fine line, and I feel like it's more originally grimdark than a lot of novels in the in that particular subgenre than I've read within the last 10 years. And yeah, I was, every time I read, I think I had to put it down for a little bit because I was just so jealous, because it's like, seriously, and the cover's amazing, his blurb is great, his characters are amazing, how he sections off his chapters are amazing. And I message him a lot too, and I'm like, Christopher, this isn't even fair. But yeah, I definitely understand that.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff out there. It's just it's a brilliant time to be a reader.
Oh yeah.
And it's just and also being an author and having author friends and being able to talk to them and seeing their success and seeing them do well, that's very cool. And I think that's one of the benefits of social media, that especially with the last couple of years of the pandemic. And all of us, I think, have had a book out during the pandemic at some point. And having a book out is not the easiest thing in the world at the best of times, and it's terrifying. Having a book out in the middle of a pandemic and trying to sell your book online whilst civilization crumbles is a bit more of a challenge, I have to admit. It's been a bit of a strange couple of years.
No, I definitely understand. I was just talking, I had so many Comic-Cons and different things lined up, and it just, everything got tanked. And I was supposed to go meet a bunch of authors and do these in person, got tanked. So that's our Fletcher and I are on Facebook talking about doing the Toronto Comic-Con in March, if it still goes on, if you can fly. I was supposed to go up there this weekend for a Comic-Con, or next weekend for a Comic-Con up in Toronto, and meet a couple people and do these in person. And the border between, we're the next state over, it's not even technically open, so I was told my wife, I was like, well, guess I'll be at home next weekend. So I was like, well, maybe I can try and rearrange and get a couple more interviews done, at least to do it that way. But yeah, so yeah, I definitely understand that. It definitely seems very strange, and you can't really go on the road right now too much, depending on where you're at. And
I'm going to London on Tuesday.
Oh, cool.
To do a reading with RJ.
Oh, cool.
So that's pretty cool. And then I've got a con at the end of October, which is the first con since the pandemic started, in Bristol. So that'd be nice to get to see, a bunch of friends of mine and say hello and have a drink and chat writing, which should be nice.
It's not easy to find people.
No,
you have to go to a community event in order. We were just talking about that a couple weeks ago, me and Mark, because him and me will go on Friday night, which is Friday night for me, Saturday morning for him, and we'll just talk writing, because we just feel so secluded right now. That's why I wanted to do the podcast still, because I'm like, well, even if you can't meet people in person, we can at least talk about it. And it's like teaching, there's a lot of teachers, but you still 1 in 10 people in a room's a teacher, and it's different. And writers, it's and then to do sci-fi or urban fantasy within a writing group, there's still not that many people. It seems like there's so many books and stuff, but when you really look at it, it's it's a very small percentage of the population. So it's hard to just talk to people about what you like to do. So
yes, it is quite difficult to most people don't understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Most of my friends who aren't authors, I'll say to them, "Oh, I've got to do this," and they'll be like, "I don't understand what you're talking about." A lot of my friends who are readers are just actually, the one thing I get more than anything else is friends of mine who are readers who will post on their Facebook or Twitter, "Oh, I've just read this book by this guy," and I'll reply, say, "Oh, he's really cool. I like him or her or whatever." And I get lots of messages from people like, how do you know these people? Well, we have the same job, and we kind of all talk to one another. Because that's sort of the only people you can talk to about having the same job.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's being an author is an odd profession at the best of times.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, like I had something pop up the other day, and I was so excited, and like, my wife and my friends really try, like they really do, but they just don't know what's going on, and it's like you're speaking a different language. And then when Mark saw my status, Timony, he messaged me on Facebook. He's like, yeah, that's so cool. And we had like a real conversation about it. And no offense to anybody, but it's just, if you don't know, you don't know. And that's just, certain life experiences, and that's like the military, like people think they know what the military goes through, but unless you're actually in the military, like, no offense, you don't have any idea. So, and that's what a lot of them have said to me too. And I feel like writing's a lot like different things like that, like different groups. You don't know unless you actually know. And yeah, it's a lot different. Like I met somebody random a couple of weeks ago. So one of my wife's like friends, husbands, and I found out he's a fantasy author and sci-fi author around here. And she mentioned something, and we probably were there for about an hour, and then she mentioned something, and I was like, oh yeah, blah, blah. And he goes, yeah, I do that. And after that, it was like, it was on, and they were like, okay, like 2.5 hours later, we're talking about writing fantasy and sci-fi. And have you checked out this book? Have you checked out this author, Twitter or whatever, or this resource? And it went by so quickly. Our wives were like, okay, boys, it's time to go. You have to, play date. But, it's like, out, especially online, it's one thing, but like out, in person, especially right now during the pandemic, like it was like finding a unicorn. I feel like it was really fun. So
I got to go to actually what I'm doing next week in London. I got to go to last month as well, and I got to see Jeff Matthews, who wrote
cool.
7 Deaths of and Adrian, who wrote Snake. Blimey, Snakewood. Can't remember now. It really bugged me. And I got to chat to them, and yeah, it was nice to talk to people in person again, and just kind of have a chat about writing and what we've been doing and what we're working on, and I think those things are important, and you don't realize how much you miss them. And I know that they've always said that writing is a very lonely profession. I think that's the phrase.
Yeah.
But I don't think writing is a lonely profession. I think you there's a lot of people to talk to and discuss the thing. But I think the actual innards of writing, discussing actual writing, is quite a lonely thing, because authors are still fairly uncommon.
Yeah,
published authors even less. So talking to people about writing and publishing and what you've been doing and how publishing is working out and how this, that, and what the other is working out. And you only really see people at cons. So when that's all taken away, you don't really have anyone to talk to with regards to your publishing and how it's been going and how the writing's going and did you find an agent and all this kind of stuff. So it's nice, hopefully things will start to get back to at least some semblance of normality in the not too distant future. And then we can start to do cons properly again and not have to not that this is terrible it's great to be able, because even when all the cons come back, I still can't fly out to America every time I want to go and do a con. So time zones are always a factor of talking to friends who write as well. But it is I think seeing when you get a room full of writers together and they're all talking shop, it is quite a magical experience because everyone's in the same boat, which is why we're not in competition with one another. We're all doing the same thing. We're all trying to get the same thing, but we're not trying to get the same thing at the expense of somebody else. So when you put us all in a room together, no matter what the genre is, it's all the same, and we're all kind of on the same level, all chatting about writing and how we write, why we write, what we're doing publishing wise. And I think that's a really big part. The community is a really big part
for sure
being an author. And social media has allowed that to happen a lot easier than it used to.
Yeah.
But no, I find that I find that kind of that community of authors who can just get together and talk to be completely essential if you're an author. Which is why I always say, if you're an author and you don't know anybody and you come to a con and you see me or someone I'm with and you recognise one of us, come and say hello, because we will 100% not shun you. Or, like, everyone's got to have their first con. Everyone's had their first kind of experience not knowing anybody. So yeah, I rarely meet authors who are assholes.
Yeah.
There's very few of them. Most
of
them you all learn about very quickly because it's such a small community.
Yeah. You get
So there's
blacklisted very quickly, I feel like, if you're one of those people, so to speak, which I do feel is a good thing.
If you're deeply unpleasant, for whatever reason, one way or another, people will talk about it and you will get known, and then no one will want to kind of talk to you.
Yeah, and then it will be a lonely profession.
And then it will be a lonely profession, yeah.
It's funny because you mentioned that, because like Mallory Coon and I were just talking about that, and Sean Crow and I were talking about that, where, Sean had approached Anthony Ryan and he just thought, oh, I'll just try, and I guess he was super, super cool and helped him out a lot, and I've talked to Kevin Hearn quite a few times about urban fantasy and research, and I'm like, hey, I love your books, I'm like, I loved how, you put this and that. I'm like, what was your research process like? I asked Dirk the same thing, and it's just nice when you find people that want to help you out. And that's where I was like, well, I really want to do a podcast to figure out what people are thinking, to give people a platform just for sales, and I don't know, it's nice to help people, because I feel like, like Mallory and I were talking about, like a couple weeks ago, and that there was, I don't know if you saw where I shared where somebody was like putting a poll out on Twitter where like, are we all enemies or are we all teammates? And I was like, seriously? I was like, we're all enemies? I was like, well, I want to buy your books. And that's what I told Christopher, Brenning. I'm like, he's like, hey, thanks for helping me promote it. I'm like, Christopher, I was like, no offense, I am being selfish because I want him to have enough sales so he gives me a second book. So I said, I do want to mention that part, but I said, he seems really cool, and it's a great book, and I think a lot of people will like it. And I don't know, I guess I see us all as teammates, because if we all do really well, publishing, more people will write, we'll get better books, and the community will grow and we'll get more fans. And to me, I guess I see it as recycling, or or helping your environment out. It's like, I just don't understand where this I like, when I put out my urban fantasy, I'll never see you and Dirk as an enemy. That's, to me, is just like the total opposite.
No,
it's weird.
It's a bizarre way of thinking.
Yeah, it really is.
We're all in this together at the end of the day. When you first start to write your book, and even with the number of self-help books and self-help websites, no one knows anything.
Yeah.
No one knows a bloody thing. So we're all trying to figure out the best way of doing it. And even when you're published, you're still trying to figure out the best way of doing it, because you need to keep doing it. So this idea that there are gatekeepers, or there are people who consider the others enemies, is just bizarre. It's completely against my mindset. When I see authors online or on a con and stuff, my first thought is, I'm gonna go say hello. And see how they're doing. And if I know any of them, then that's great. If I don't know any of them, then hopefully I will by the end of it. I find that really strange that people see. I put on Twitter a while ago, I said that if you are someone who, and you want me to follow you back, then interact in some, just say hello. Really. Don't just kind of follow me and then unfollow me because I didn't immediately follow you back.
That drives me insane.
That drives really me so weird crazy. Way of it's just a really strange idea of following someone, and then when they don't follow you back, you just unfollow them. So, and because
I don't have that much time in a day, even if I wanted to. I'm like, and it never would occur to me. I'm like, it's so weird. Like, I probably been at like 9:36, which I don't care, because my thing is like, people like you or Dirk or Mark, like I feel it's all about quality rather than quantity. So I'm like, I don't care. But I just find it so ironic that so many people lately have done that to me. And I'm just like, okay, see it. Like, I don't know what their agenda
Yeah.
is. And I don't even care, because I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm like, this probably really isn't the place for you. Like, I want people around me, who want to retweet or have conversations,
Yes.
talk about books. I'm like, fine, see you later. It's no skin off my teeth. But yeah, it's a very interesting concept. I guess I'm a different type of person. I just don't get it. But
No, I don't either.
yeah.
I find it very strange. I want to talk to authors. I
Yeah.
want to have conversations with them, because I'm an author, and I find that when we as authors talk to other authors, we all learn something. That's
Yeah.
how we get better as a rule. It's just when I read somebody else's books, I hope that I become a better writer because I've read something somebody else has written, and I can see something else that from someone else's point of view. So I find that a deeply, deeply odd thing to do. The unfollowing thing, but I don't think we're enemies or right. That's weird. That's a really weird way to live your life.
I know, right? We just like that had to happen. That was 2 weeks ago. That had to happen like the week before her and I had our interview. And I think Scott Oden and I talked about before we started recording too. We were just like rolled our eyes. We're like, yeah, okay. Like it was just such a bizarre concept to me. It's very, very strange. Because I said to a friend of mine, he's like, man, you really do share a lot of people's stuff. And I'm like, well, I will consider them friends. I was like, or, peers. I was like, I want people to sell their books. I'm like, so why would I not? I said, if I could retweet yours, like the same thing 10 times, I do it on both of my accounts as often as I can. But it's like, I wish you had the option, to retweet, like 10 times. So I'd be like, oh, Black Coat 10 times, or whatever, you know what I mean? Just so people would see it. And it's sometimes I do it just to undo it, and then I'll do it again just for a different time of day. If I did it and nobody really saw it or whatever, I'll do that. But yeah, it's very strange to me. But so we are running short on the Spotify time. I felt, again, I kind of diverged from questions, but we had a lot of really good stuff. And Sundays are magic, man. I don't know what's up with Sundays. Like, and Ben said, I think it's everybody's rested and has had coffee. So maybe that's it. But Sundays are always the best day to interview people. No offense, Mark Timoney, yours were amazing. Okay. So obviously you're gonna promo Black Coat. I'll put that in the description for this video that we'll put out today. We'll put it on the RSS feed, the Spotify. We'll also be sharing that like I have been this week. Be doing that a lot the next couple of days, especially for you. Is there anything else that you want to promo or any other news you have right now?
I don't have any other news at the moment. I've got news that might possibly be happening at some point in the not too distant future, but I'm not allowed to talk about it at the moment. So
we'll have to have you on. We'll have to have you on so you can share that news. Awesome.
So that's always a fun thing.
That's cool. I love when people say that though, because that means that something really good happened, and I can't wait. Like I actually really like surprises, especially when it's somebody that I know. So that's awesome.
It's always nice when you kind of, it hasn't quite happened, but it's nearly happened.
Getting there.
And then I'll be like, okay, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But now you kind of sit in that state of limbo of I can't talk about it. I'm not allowed to talk about it. Not tell you. I can't tell you, but it's cool. But I can't tell you.
Yeah.
So there's
I want to do that myself one of these days. That's when I really know I made it, Steve.
And but yeah, I mean, there's nothing else promo wise. People can go out and pick up like Helican Chronicles or Avalon Chronicles or Rebellion Chronicles. Or
I'll be putting those links in for Amazon as well for the book one for both of those series. So you guys can take a look at Steve's books there. So you guys can just click right on the link. So we'll do those book one for both of those series, and then the Black Coat link as well. And I did just want to say before we wrap up, like I said, Steve, earlier, like I'm really enjoying chapter 1 of Black Coat. I was hooked instantly. So I am really excited that you're thinking about doing another novella there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I have a plan for another novella. I have a plan for a whole series of science fiction.
Oh, cool.
It's just finding time in the day to write a
Oh,
whole
yeah,
series
yeah,
of
yeah.
science fiction books. I have a plan of, I think it's like 8 or 9
Oh,
books.
cool. That's awesome.
And I do have a plan for a sequel to Black Coat.
Oh, cool.
But it might not be a novella; it might be a full novel. It depends.
Oh,
on,
even better.
depends on time and whether or not the story allows for a full novel. Because
Yeah.
normally I go into a story and I know this is a novella or this is a novel. But there are occasions when I've written a novella and it's become a novel.
That's me right now.
So yeah, there's the best intentions. It will be a novella, but it could be War and Peace by the time I finish. I don't know.
Well, I'll buy it either way, so you can just write it and just put it in the Amazon store.
That's fine then. So yeah, it's but no, people seem to like Black Coat. Everyone seems to enjoy it. Most people seem to enjoy it. I enjoyed writing it. It was a lot of fun. I wanted to write I've always liked science fiction, and I've always liked like crime noir kind of science fiction as well, or just crime noir in general.
No, yeah.
So I wanted to kind of mash them together and just that's the kind of thing with self-publishing. Like I said earlier, you get to do those things you might not have been able to do at a publisher's or your current publisher. So it was a lot of fun. It was good fun to do, good fun to write, and I got to do a scene that I've been wanting to write since I first started writing.
Oh, cool.
Which is a mech versus a monster scene.
Oh, cool.
A fight between a mech and a monster, and I wanted to write that for years and years. And I finally got to write it, and then I sat down after I wrote it, and I went, "Yeah,
that's really good."
Cool. And I'm very happy. And I've had people emailing me, messaging me, and saying that's my favorite bit of the book. And I was so happy because it's brilliant, and I'm really happy that people like it because when as an author, when you write something and you think that's my favorite bit in that book, and other people tell you that's their favorite bit in the book. There's nothing else quite like it.
Well, you did it,
So that's my Black Coat. It's good. I like it. So it works out well.
Yeah. If you guys need anything more than that, okay, I don't know what to tell you about science fiction. Like this is the wrong podcast for you. You should probably find a different genre to read. That sounds amazing. Well, Steve, I really appreciate you coming on today. We'll do our sign off here, and per usual, I will be talking to you on Twitter. Thanks again for coming on today. Guys, Steve and I both really want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. You can find our videos on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and like I said, we'll have the audio for the Spotify up later today. So Steve's will be one of those first few that are on there. Feel free to reach out to us at Scholars of Uma, that's UMA@gmail.com. Let us know who you'd like to see on future podcasts, any questions you want to ask future guests. Feel free to send us any videos or pictures that are fantasy and sci-fi related. Again, Steve, really want to thank you for coming on. It was fun. I look forward to talking to you on Twitter, and I really look forward to having you back in the future and hearing about that news. So
yes, yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, you have a good rest of the day, my friend, and I will talk to you later.
See you later.